Where I'm from, you know I'm from Murder Town. What we do, stab 'em up and gun 'em down. When they fall, keep shooting to make sure they're dead. Where we hit 'em, in their hearts and in their head. You think I can hop on stage with you at your next show, David, and do that?
Worst talents have hopped on and done.
I thought I had something there for a second. You think I was thinking that maybe if there's ever a show where you're sick or something, I could hop in and just do a set for you.
Well, you might have noticed, been at, or attended, or heard about. I still usually play the show sick.
Listen, Matt, you will have to get a haircut as cool as David's. Let me tell you why we got David on. Let me tell you why I'm wearing corpse paint. I've been infatuated with Norwegian Black Metal since I was in high school. And it's actually something that I've always wanted to talk to David Gunn about, of all people. And I'll explain why. It's because in music, but especially in metal and especially in black metal, there's a lot of hyperbole around it. And some of it I get. Some people are playing a character and they realize they're playing a character. And then other people, I think, might take themselves a little too seriously. So what I always wanted to ask David was, David, when King 810 broke out and you were telling stories of real experiences that you actually had, was it frustrating to maybe be bumping shoulders with guys that were telling stories that they read out of a book about elves or a fantasy book, or experiences that they never had but tried to project? What was that like, or is like?
By the time that happened, I was an adult, so I had this, it might be laughable to say level of maturity now, but more mature than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had that same poser kind of attitude that the Norwegians had about the music, because I was living that lifestyle. And it's the same even if you go to the rap and hip hop, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's just mostly because industry is industry. Where I come from, you kind of tell these stories as not as humorous, but kind of dark humor. Austin might be able to chime in about having a sense of humor or an ability to laugh at dark things, even if something like that.
Gallows humor.
So these are things you just talk about off the cuff anyway. You know, half of the things I talked about, I was already convicted of. It was public knowledge. So it wasn't strange. And I learned pretty quick, though, that this really wasn't table talk that you should be sharing, because the industry is just that. It's just an industry. But it wasn't a thing where I was trying to come and be this person or this figure. It was more just my natural thing. This is how me and my friends talk, and I didn't think to self-censor or do something like that, if that makes any sense.
That makes complete sense. It's kind of like, I think 50 Cent had even talked about that. He's like, I didn't run around and tell people, look at my gunshot wounds. And he actually tried to kind of hide it because he got dropped. When he got shot, he got dropped from the label. What label was that?
I think it was Island, I believe. But I could be wrong, or it could be Columbia or something like that. But yeah, it was looked down upon. And I found the same thing happened with us, but there was an upplaying from the industry types. They wanted to present this idea or run these, what I considered corny stunts. campaigns, PR, whatever. They wanted to put that there, and they wanted to make things seem a certain way. And it was fine because they were that way. They were actually even worse. I think I've been quoted in interviews saying that, to the degree that an outsider can understand what we're talking about is no degree at all. But the industry has no problem upplaying these things if it's in their favor. And the minute it kind of affects their interest or bottom line or their look or their reputation, especially today, it's more about reputation than it is bottom line. But the minute it affects their bag, then they put the kibosh on that immediately. And I think that has a lot of parallels with black metal, which we can get into.
Well, this is what I was thinking with black metal. All the things that you had just said was, as I look back on it and think about it, because when you first hear about it as a teenager, it's shocking. But what I'm thinking it was, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like black metal is really just a lot of one-upsmanship. It was guys who were trying to one-up Ozzy. They were trying to make their music harder than Venom or Merciful Fate. And so it was really out of a desire to go mainstream in some ways, I think, where like Mayhem and those guys, that's kind of been my take on it as far as the roots of Norwegian black metal were really just the roots of showbiz. What do you think?
Real quick, before we do that, we do got to call Dave real fast.
Let's get Dave's take.
Hello.
Hey, Dave, what's up?
How are you, sir?
Dave Landau here. So he's a native of Detroit. And then, David, you are a native of Flint. We're talking about Norwegian death metal today. Are you a metal fan?
I am.
Oh, you are? All right, cool.
Dave, by the way, my name's Matt. It's nice to meet you over the phone here. So I didn't realize that you were from Detroit, so that's awesome.
Oh, very cool, man. Very nice to meet you.
So we got David Gunn from King 810. He's from Flint. So Dave, the question that I just asked David Gunn here was, first of all, are you familiar with any of the black metal lore from Norway? Like, have you watched the movie Lords of Chaos or read anything on bands like Mayhem or Gorgoroth?
Yeah, I have. I've seen Lords of Chaos with Roy Culkin, and I've seen, I know all about that kind of, I don't know a ton about the music out of there. I've heard some of it, obviously, because I watched the movie, but I don't know a ton out of a ton of what came out of there.
So my question here right now is, was really the Norwegian black metal roots just the roots of one-upsmanship, of just trying to one-up each other, trying to be more over the top than Ozzy, trying to be harder than Venom and Merciful Hate, more so than it was guys who were, had a core belief in Satanism and actually being heavy metal terrorists, as they might call themselves?
Yeah, that's what I think it was people trying to outdo one another and kind of start, like they were starting fires, they were burning stuff down, and one of them actually ended up being a complete sociopath. So, it just kept getting worse and worse, where I'm not even sure if at one point it was really about the music or actually about just, I don't know, burning down houses. I'm not really sure if it was which one came first, because it's odd, because you can look at it too. There's like, when you look at punk in the United States, there's, you can look at Iggy Pop and go, okay, well, that dude's punk. You can almost look at the roots when you go to like the Grandy Ballroom and look at Alice Cooper. I mean, not necessarily punk, but where a lot of it came from, like the Stooges, and you go, okay, well, yeah, there's punk, it's different, it's out there, but then there's G.G. Allen, who's just cutting himself open and crapping on stage, and you're like, all right, well, is that really about the music, or is that just seeing how far you can take it in front of an audience?
Yeah, David Gunn's got my favorite take on G.G. Allen. He said G.G. Allen's a pussy because he had to be high to do any of those stunts that he did.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's really his brother, more or less, too, who was a pussy, because he basically took a guy who was obviously mentally ill and was like, just go hurt yourself and I'm going to take the check.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Like, yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous. So, yeah, it really, like, I don't even know, because I wouldn't call him musically talented if you really break it down. Like, have you ever seen the movie Hated?
I don't think I have.
Okay, it's by Todd Phillips. It was like his student film. He's the one that did like Old School and The Hangover and all that. And he basically followed Gigi Allen around and interviewed him and stuff. And like you see like the real guy. And it really is just a story of like a brother abusing his brother. And by the end of it, it's just like really shoddy, grainy camera footage of a guy like walking around, you know, like right before he ends up killing himself, which he didn't do on stage, which he kind of promised.
I know.
Which he kind of promised.
There's the documentary, The Allens, which is, I don't know if you've seen that, if either of you guys have seen that, but it's pretty interesting. And then getting ready for this one, I was watching the documentary Until the Light Takes Us. And, they're just interviewing these Norwegian guys, and it's funny, like listening to their reasons for why they burned down churches and stuff. But Dave, what you said reminded me of, I heard a story once that people who love Star Wars hate the movies, but they love the books and they love the lore and all of that stuff. But the movies are actually their least favorite part of Star Wars. And I kind of wonder, and David Gunn, I want to hear your take on this too. I wonder if the music is really second or last with black metal, if it's more about the image and if it's more about the brand of it than it is the music.
Right. I mean, that's really what I do think it is, especially with like Norwegian death metal, which itself is kind of an odd thing because when you think Norway, you think like, okay, Roald Dahl, James and the Giant Peach, like he had some adult fiction, obviously, but it's just not really a country where you really do think death metal, you know?
Yeah.
So I do think it's a way to kind of stand out, but I also think it's a way to create this huge market of posers that were also around. Like, I'm 41, I don't know your age, but when I was around in high school, it was the same with any kind of goth kid or any kind of metal. Like, the real punks you knew because after school they did death matches in the middle of Detroit where they were actually hitting each other with glass bottles, and you're like, oh, that dude's for real. Like, he's really willing to hurt himself.
Wait, did you go to any of these death matches?
Yeah, dude, of course. And trust me, I was a total drug addict, but I was not hardcore enough to do any of them. But I would watch, no problem at all. But it would create somebody where it's like, well, yeah, that guy has a mohawk and he's insane, and he would do stuff that was crazy. But you knew the ones that were like, well, that guy just paints his nails. He listens to Marilyn Manson. He's not really dangerous. He just hates his dad.
Yeah, exactly.
David Gunn, what do you remember? Did they have these up in Flint's, these death matches with bottles?
Yeah, we were on the news several times for these death matches modeled after a lot of the Japanese death match wrestling. So I think that's what Dave's talking about with, you would have the barbed wire, the razor wire that you would steal from the torn down industrial plant that's been closed since the 80s. You'd have the glass, you have the ladders, you're jumping off your buddy's house, breaking your knee on his neck. And
did you do any of the fights, David?
Yeah. I've burnt half the freckles off my face with a gasoline, flaming table match kind of thing that you would see.
Damn, Michigan is wild.
Yeah, I haven't been to a death
were you
match.
in ECW then? Was it around that time?
This was kind of around the time when, you had to pay like $20 to some unknown provider to get some shitty camcorder version of a ECW tape in the mail or something.
Yeah, same deal. Right. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm talking about. So you get the Cactus Jack fight where he had to use actual barbed wire before he became Mankind, or you get variations of the overseas fights where it was real glass, real barbed wire. Even at the state fairground in Detroit, they would use real weapons. It was pretty crazy, but yeah, like David said, same thing. It was like glass, barbed wire, bricks. Like, you would see different things that people would have laid out, and they would have death matches between two people.
So, David, what do you what is your kind of take on the black metal thing? Are these guys harmless nerds, or were they true terrorists? I mean, what's your whole take as someone in the metal scene? What was what are your thoughts on Norwegian black metal? I'm sure it was something you studied as a musician growing up.
Yeah, I think Dave kind of has it in a nutshell. There were the posers, and that's kind of where Norway came in. I can try to gloss over it. The history really quick. It started with Venom, and Venom is English. And, Venom would have lyrics like, we drink the vomit of the priest, make love to the dying whore, we suck the blood of the beast, and hold the key to death's door, right? And everyone was really into that. But then Kronos, this, from Venom would go in and say, I don't preach Satanism and occultism or witchcraft or anything. Rock and roll is entertainment, and that's as far as it goes, which really means that's as far as he goes. So those were the kind of the poser figures of what Dave was alluding to. But in Norway, they seen themselves as the real deal. So when Dead from Mayhem shot himself in the face with a shotgun, which in a way is the real deal, Euronymous blamed the socially accepted scene of death metal. He said, he lived for the true black metal lifestyle, black clothes, spikes and crosses. And today there are just children in jogging suits and skateboards and hardcore moral ideals, which has nothing to do with black. And he wanted people to fear black metal. And he claims that's why Dead killed himself. So I think Norwegian black metal, with the burning of the churches and things like that, those could be defined as real warriors for, say, something like a paganism or an old world, old god thing, that are really kind of acting as activists against, the invading, what they called the revenge of the church, the Crusades, or the church invading their country. They kind of had this nationalism for the old Norwegian, they're naming their bands after Tolkien novel characters and stuff like that. It's a little bit ironic, but they had an idea,
Yeah, definitely see that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because they are fighting. I mean, they were completely opposites of what you would think of the country. And I mean, every story of every band that seems to be legit has an extremely dark story behind it, like to another level than like just say American metal or punk or even England metal or punk.
David, what are your thoughts on the whole? So I just want to dive into Mayhem just a little bit deeper here. Because they were kind of the guys that really, I feel like, popped it off. They're obviously, leading that scene at the time. When you look at Dead, it's kind of sad because it just seems like he was a dude who had some serious, mental health issues and was around somebody who was supposedly Euronymous was constantly telling him like, it'd be awesome if you killed yourself, and was in his ear at all times. And then, Euronymous ends up getting killed years later by Varg. Gets stabbed to death or whatever. And so the whole band is just kind of, it's a very odd thing. So yeah, I was going to say, David, what are your thoughts on the whole relationship with Euronymous and Varg, and Dead as well? Yeah,
this was before mental health was a trending topic, wasn't it?
Yeah, he seemed like he was somebody who truly had some issues, not pretending.
Yeah, the thing I kind of don't like conflating is black metal as Satanism. The Norwegian idea, the paganism, the old gods and stuff. Those are what we would call today, in politically correct speak, Satan adjacent, Okay. It's, as we know, the paganism and old world God worship, the burning of churches doesn't necessarily mean pro-Satanism. It just means anti-Christian. Yeah. And Satanism is even a weird term, but paganism is older than Christianity, and Christianity is a real hyper low resolution, black and white, binary, good and evil. So if you're burning churches, you are for the devil. But if you don't really claim to be for the devil, you're not really for the devil. You're kind of just for the paganism and kind of against the invasion of the church, because Satan and Christ kind of come in the same package. People say that Christ is derived from Dionysus and Satan has his derivatives in Pan. So these all predate Christianity. And I don't necessarily think if you're burning churches that you are Satanist. You just
want record sales?
Well, you could want record sales too. A lot of these guys were broke, but I think Lucifer comes in with Judaism and stuff like that. And I never make the leap to anti-Christianity being Satanism, because Satanism, as defined by Anton LaVey, is just a derivative Nietzscheism.
Yeah. So what he's saying here is that like if you listen to Varg from Mayhem talk, he talks a lot about how Christianity had taken over Norway and extinguished a lot of their traditions. And when I listen to Varg talk, there's a few things. For one, he seems like someone who doesn't truly understand Christianity, but will sit there and tell you about it. The other thing that's interesting about it is that the first colonizer of Christianity in Norway was a Norwegian. It was actually a guy who was born and raised in Norway. So it wasn't like it was somebody who came, from Italy or something and forced it down on people. So I thought that was ironic when I was kind of doing research for this. The other thing I always think about with these guys, so what David's saying is these guys probably didn't even believe in the devil at the end of the day, which people like Anton LaVey, I believe, would say, oh, I don't actually believe in Satan. I'm basically just saying Satan is just a metaphor.
Well, Anton LaVey was really just trying to have orgies and meet celebrities. I mean, that was really all that boiled down to was, I mean, that's why people are like, Sammy Davis Jr. was a celebrity. It's like, no, or was a Satanist. It's like, no, he was a sex addict.
Yeah, that's spot on because...
Yeah, it's completely different.
Dude, we talked to Matt, had a conversation with Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's right-hand man, and he agreed to talk to him, and Matt goes, so how'd you meet, Charles Manson? And he goes, oh, well, I ran into him and he said that he had all these girls that were just super horny and they were wearing him out and asked me to take care of them. So it's just like, he's like, sure, I'll be in your family. Who do I need to stab?
Yeah, it's spot on.
With what David's saying is that a lot of these guys, if you ask them, they probably wouldn't even believe in Satan. They were just against Christianity. So in their mind, they thought that they would burn down these churches and maybe reclaim that old pagan roots of Norway, right?
Yeah, I think that's the difference between where it seemed to start with Venom and Merciful Fate and stuff. And then when the Norwegians and some Swedes came along, they took it to the next level, because as Dave just said, with Sammy Davis, everyone in white America said that Robert Johnson was the progenitor of all evil. This is like when the devil became infused with music and blues, and jazz used to be evil because blacks were in nightclubs possessing the whites with devilish hymns. And then it was blues. It was slave songs laced with voodoo themes when the French came over to New Orleans. And then rock and roll with the Rolling Stones played with satanic imagery. Led Zeppelin plays with the Crowley imagery. You got the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper. Yeah. They're all playing with this satanic imagery, and everything's fine because they're selling records. But the Norwegians kind of took it to the next level, and even Ozzy kind of lifted his whole shtick from a band called Coven. And Coven used to record and perform Black Masses live, and they actually predate Ozzy, and they have a song called Black Sabbath, and their singer's name is Oz Osbourne. So you can put two and two together on that.
Oh, wow.
Look up Coven. And Coven.
That's interesting you say that too, because even with blacks and nightclubs and everything, they didn't even give the credit to that, because Harry Belafonte was overlooked for being the first artist to sell 1 million records. They gave it to Elvis and basically blamed blacks for it. And, it was kind of completely overlooked because it was, being possessed. And any kind of musical shift could always easily, be blamed on the devil. And it's like, when you look back at it now, it's like the song like Splish Splash, I Was Taking a Bath. At one point, somebody was like, that's the work of the devil. Like anything that shifted became some sort of, element of Satan. So it was always this very simplistic way to ignore change or a shift in society.
They called Elvis the king, but they said the hip shaking was, from the blacks.
The other thing with Satan, when people talk about Satan and they use imagery as the pentagrams or whatever, I always think about Motley Crue with Shout at the Devil, where when they would talk about it, they're like, we just use the devil to piss people off. And I always imagine that there's always that element of it where they're just doing it to piss people off and they think it's funny, you know? And then the band Gorgoroth, I forget the guy's name, the singer of Gorgoroth, I'll have to look it up. But when they interviewed him, that was the first time where I've ever seen a guy really double down on, you know, this music is for Satan or whatever. And I remember the first time, Dave, are you familiar with that band, Gorgoroth?
Vaguely. I do know who they are, but I couldn't name a song or anything.
I just like to interject here real quick. I'm absorbing all of this because while you guys were listening to black metal and death metal, I had Celine Dion CDs and TLC CDs.
I had TLC too, and I wasn't raised by two men, so I didn't have Celine Dion.
You know, talking about Gaahl from Gorgoroth. Well, this is kind of a funny tie into it, though, with something Landau just said, though, was I remember thinking Gaahl from Gorgoroth was super spooky, and then I read more about him, and I saw, like, he had been arrested for torturing a guy, and I'm like, oh, my, and I keep reading. I find out this dude's actually homosexual, and it kind of sounded like maybe they were just having some BDSM thing that got a little bit carried away, and he got arrested for it. So then I'm like, oh, I don't like. It was like this real spooky. He's got all this makeup and hair, or whatever. I was kind of shocked to find out that he was gay. I didn't expect that.
Now they would just make him the Flash.
Yeah.
His husband or whatever it was, he was with a very successful hairdresser, and that's not a joke. Although I'm here with a couple comedians, that's one of the cases where the reality is actually comedic. Most evil guy in the world is just banging some hairdresser.
It's funny too, because if you read like the columns from the metal websites, like when they're always like the top 10 most evil bands of all time, and Gorgoroth will be on the list like 3 times. But if you actually watch the interview with him where he's not trying to be, you know, Gaahl from Gorgoroth, he just seems like a normal,
dressed like Liberace.
Not quite that far. David, what is so? Landau, if you're not familiar with King 810, David Gunn, they're essentially his memoirs. He talks about what it was like growing up in Flint, Michigan, and so these are true stories. So David Gunn, when you're listening to, when you look back at Gorgoroth or Mayhem and stuff like that, do you think it's comical? Does it frustrate you? What are your thoughts when you see the images that they project, whether it's the dead pig carcasses on stage and all the fake blood? I mean, as a musician, what do you think about that?
Since Varg actually stabbed Euronymous on 810, I believe that was just a universal type of incarnation.
I didn't know
and
that.
And then we came out.
I didn't know that.
30, 50 years later.
I didn't realize that. And, you know, in that documentary I was watching, they were talking about the Faust. He was another Norwegian musician he's a drummer, yeah. And he had stabbed, he found there's a homosexual guy that sounds like he came onto him. And so his response was to stab him to death. And they're talking to his friend, and his friend was kind of like, had this arrogant attitude of like, I was kind of impressed because I didn't think he had it in him. And I'm thinking, okay, asshole, have you ever stabbed somebody to death before? Like, this guy's acting like he's the gatekeeper of like, I didn't think he actually had it in him to murder somebody. It's like, have you murdered somebody? Why are you being like pompous about this?
I would like to get Landau, you and Gunn's take, just since, you know, Gunn's from Flint, you're from Detroit. So growing up in Detroit, what was your view? What was everyone's view on Flint?
Flint actually to us seemed like it was a far more dangerous place. Like, it really seemed more like a more Baghdad sort of a place than Detroit did. Honestly, like, when I first started performing in Flint, it was a lot different. But I mean, it definitely seemed like, especially the music scene definitely seemed a lot more hardcore. And I can't remember, but I mean, I'm a big fan of Slum Village, and I know that they claim Detroit, but I think a couple of them were from Flint. But I remember it being just it was a very, very hardcore town. And when, you know, the water thing and all that happened, I wasn't surprised, because Flint was always known, like, when I was very young, like, the only good thing that was ever done, I think, by Michael Moore was Roger and Me. saying like, why don't you actually build up something in Flint, like a Nike factory or whatever it was, because it was where cars came from. I mean, the people that protested for unions to do quality things. I mean, Flint actually stood for something in the automobile industry, and the town was destroyed essentially. And Detroit's sort of like that too, where it was it was the Paris of the Midwest. It's where the assembly line was created. People moved from everywhere to be a part of it, and it was another city that was kind of destroyed by corrupt politicians over time. And but to us, Flint was a little bit scarier than Detroit was. And I mean, I used to go to raves and stuff in Detroit and both places, but yeah, Flint was it was a lot sadder to us, and that, I don't mean that as a negative. It just always seemed very barren whenever you would go through there.
All right. And then Gunn, what is your take on Landau's take, and then kind of what you guys thought about Detroit?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. We thought Detroit, it's called the city. We don't even refer to it as Detroit. So it's kind of like the place where you can go, and it's an existing city, although it is a shell of what it used to be. We look at it like, he says, this is a sad, kind of hopeless place. Detroit was kind of the hopeful place. It was 1 hour away, and you could go, and it's a real city, because people don't realize Flint is pretty tiny. There's less than 100,000 people here. So going to a city of a few million was kind of cool, I guess. It's where all the Detroit had a successful mafia, one of the more successful ones, actually. They were known for the electronic music. A lot of Germans came over and like set up in Detroit, whatever. We were just hopeless and shitty. Like, we had repulsion, and we just wanted to destroy shit and shoot people. But in Detroit, there seemed to be some type of, financial industry. There was a car dealership and shit. You thought this was a legit city with people. And, that was kind of the thinking growing up. That was where you went to the big shows too. You didn't go, there was no big shows in Flint when I was growing up. There was no venue that held more than a couple hundred people. There wasn't anything going on like that. So Detroit was where it was kind of like that second kind of twin city thing, but it was a much bigger brother.
Landau, you should. Gunn's got a book called Summertime in Murder Town, and he talks about growing up in Flint, and it's one of the few books I've ever read twice. It's one of my favorites. It's honestly a really good book. You should definitely check it out.
I will buy it right now, and I'd like to have him on my show as well.
Yeah. Talk about your show.
Oh, it's a new show. I just started on the Blaze. It's called Normal World. We do sketches, bands, all kinds of stuff that we're just putting out there, and we're only on episode 6. Episode 7 comes out tonight. I won't be there. I'm out of town for a funeral, but I'll be back next week, and we're just kind of doing stuff that's a little more irreverent and different. So we're trying to kind of recreate sketch comedy, and as well as like late night talk, and doing it in a way that's never been done before. So I hope people tune in. It's at the Blaze. We have some stuff on YouTube, and it's every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 10 p.m. And yeah, I will definitely buy your book right now and read it. And I'm very interested in that because I would like to see what it's like to grow up in Flint, because I've only seen it, obviously from Detroit. And I think that's a really good point. Even going to see like Gaahl at Harpo's would probably be a bigger show than you could see in Flint, at least when I was growing up. So I was lucky in that sense, where Detroit did have a lot of excellent music, and still to this day, like, bands wanted to play Detroit. Like, it's sort of a rite of passage and a staple, because Motown was here. I was lucky enough to grow up with really amazing music from where, I'm from. So I was lucky to grow up with such a rich music scene that.
Yeah, you should you should have King 810 on the show, Dave. That'd be awesome.
That'd be cool. I'll have to check out the show, because I didn't know you had started. I've been kept up with you over the years, just checking you out. Obviously, seen you on Crowder and stuff, but I always try to keep up with people from the area, even if it doesn't really matter. Like John Witherspoon, I always loved him because he was from Detroit.
The day I met him, I did a TV show with him, which is cool, but I worked with him, and I couldn't tell what his opinion would be of me, just being white and whatever. So I brought him Verner's and Better Made chips, and he could not have been happier. And he told me that his brother was a Motown singer that got shot, and dude, he was an amazing guy. He had some crazy stories from growing up in Detroit.
I think that's why most people think it's a rite of passage to play Detroit, because they think if they play a tough city, they're tough.
Absolutely. And I did honestly just buy Summertime and Murder Town, How I Survived Were the Best documentary. Just bought.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you putting that quarter in my pocket, man. I really.
Well, that's a great title.
It is.
Suck at titling stuff.
It's incredible.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it is.
Landau, it truly is. It's a good book. I need to ask both of you two Michigan boys, when Grit Sandwiches for Breakfast, Kid Rock's one of his first albums came out, did you guys bump the song Yodelin' in the Valley, or was that just me?
What does Michigan think of Kid Rock?
Well, hold on. I want to see if have you
go
guys
first.
listened to Yodelin' in the Valley, Gunn, Landau?
I liked him a lot. I have nothing against him, but it just wasn't my cup of tea when I was young, and that's not to be cooler than anybody. I didn't mind Devil Without a Cause, some of his earlier stuff.
Oh, this was way before that.
It wasn't really my thing. I mean, I'm happy to see him succeed, but he's in like Nashville, and I was more into Eminem, to be honest, at the time.
Yeah,
and especially Bad Meets Evil, because I think Royce the 5'9" is just an incredible rapper.
I was just wondering if people in Michigan are proud of Kid Rock, or if they just don't.
Oh, they
really
love him.
Okay, cool.
Dude, he sells out like the Little Caesars Arena like 10 nights in a row. It's bananas.
Yeah. Oh wow.
We are proud of anything that happens, by the way. We are even proud to get on the #1 list for murders. Of course, Kid Rock is doing us huge favors. So we love anyone that does anything.
You know what?
Right?
I told David Gunn this, and it'd be cool to have Landau on it as well, because we could do a whole episode on the music from Michigan, like Seeger, Kid Rock, Eminem, the Insane Clown Posse, King 810.
Dude, didn't Seeger own a comedy club in Detroit at one time?
Not that I know of.
There is
he's connected to Main Street, which that song's actually about Ann Arbor, Main Street in Ann Arbor. And the Main Street Comedy Club became the Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase, but I don't know if he had a tie.
Okay, maybe it was someone had told me that he hung out there all the time. Was there a balcony there? I'm like,
he used to hang out at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle all the time.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. And then so did you ever perform at a comedy club in Flint in like the mid 2000s?
Well, yeah, there was a comedy club there briefly. I can't remember the name.
Yeah, I performed there and I can't remember it either, and I can't find anything on.
There used to be a bar I played called Maxie's, and the comedy club was directly next to Maxie's. I remember being there. And I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I used to work there, just bouncing people out on their head.
Oh, dude, thank you.
What was your craziest bouncer story?
Someone tried to stab me, but that really wasn't crazy. They tried to stab me at work or not at work or whatever. And it was, it's just I can't think of anything really crazy. It's just more like regular freaky shit where, some guy's fucking some girls in the bathroom and whatever. He's drunk. You try to tell him to leave, even though you really don't care if he leaves or not, but they want him out of there, and you kind of think he's cool, but then he pulls a knife on you, so you got to break his wrist and shit. And it was just normal stuff like that. They had a lot of comedy in Maxie's though too.
What's normal to him might be what's crazy to you. It reminds me of Chuck Liddell had the story where a guy came up to him and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing MMA. I'm 10-0 in the street." And Chuck Liddell said, 10-0? That's a weekend in high school, man. So that's like asking Dave about someone pulled a knife on you. It's like, yeah, man, that's just living.
I'm gonna cut you, man. Like one of those little knives from
Dude, Maxie's was nuts. I remember there was a guy who was wearing all purple, and Lebanon was at war at the time. And he started screaming at me. I'm like, where are you from? And he goes, Lebanon. I go, well, I'm sorry about your country, Grimace. And he went into the bathroom And he just started beating the shit out of the bathroom, and all you could hear was like him punching everything. And then, some bouncers dragged him out for beating the crap out of him, which might have been you. So that it was, it was, but like, there was always a fight. I don't know if there was one time I was there doing comedy where there wasn't a fight outside.
There was always a fight. Yeah, there was usually just try to have the fight outside, but that was back in the times when you as a comedian you could be a little bit more comedic.
I like the Maxie sounds like the real Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, where there's just always a fight. And you got to bring in
And David Gunn was the Patrick Swayze character.
Yeah, as opposed to two guys who want to police the speech.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Do you guys got any final thoughts on black metal? I know we covered a lot of ground, and that's okay. I like that we can go down rabbit holes on the show. But yeah, I just wanted to see if anybody had any other humorous or interesting takes at all with black metal. Gunn, I'd kick it to you real quick, and then we could let Landau close us out. Does that sound good?
My basic take is, I think the media is kind of the gasoline that kind of lets the genie out of the lamp. The truth is, Norway was a very safe, conservative, couple million people, very rich, very coddled. These are people that had curtains and televisions banned in their country and dancing banned. And I think this type of thing was kind of a taboo backlash, the censoring and prohibiting kind of thing that was going on. And
so they banned curtains
the other way,
like for your house.
Yeah, they're a super conservative place. And I think that was a backlash. But again, even our history of black metal that we just covered, we covered the main bullet points, but it was probably in entirety 50 people. So I don't think this would have turned into a phenomena like it actually ended up being. And the U.S. created a phenomena as well. If you remember the satanic panic.
Oh, yeah.
And the media takes these things and turns them into big horror stories where they, of course, following shortly after, recommend that they have the one and only remedy to cure it. So they did the same thing with Reefer Madness, as we know, and today they still create boogeymens.
I wish we did that to you. The satanic panic in school, it was even in school, they played some like 60 Minutes piece on a kid that listened to Judas Priest and then shot himself in the face with a shotgun, and his head was deformed, and then he died, and he was on like a swinging, talking about how Judas Priest like told him to shoot himself, and it was scarring.
And they actually did this. If you remember, C. Lawrence Tucker against Tupac, and remember they brought D. Snyder up in front of Congress to make Tipper Gore look like a fucking idiot, more so than Al Gore, who would look like an idiot.
Oh yeah, he's in Antarctica right now, just wanting. He's like, why didn't it flood? He's sacrificing emperor penguins to the god Elsa.
Yeah. Well, the point being, it's hilarious today, but we have to remember that this was a real thing that created groups like this. Is how the CIA and ATF were created, by the way. Propagandic kind of media ginned up conspiracies turned reality, if there is such thing. Could you imagine today running around thinking or saying that rap music is to blame for all inner city violence? You'd be laughed out of the room. No one would go for that today, but we bit on it very much back in those days. Don't we blame the inner city violence on the new boogeyman and the new witch hunt, the next villain that we come up with? It's no longer rap music. We got it wrong. And now it's...
And you have Sam Smith just wolfing down pudding pops and dressing as the devil, trying to get attention like that. And they're like, no.
Like, can we stop this, please? We need them to be somewhat attractive.
We're not blaming music anymore.
He looked like there was one where like the picture of him in just like straps, just accentuating all of his roles, and he was just laying there like a little piglet.
The devil was supposed to be an alluring temptress, like a very beautiful, angelic, very seductive singer, musician, all these things. There is nothing alluring to any human being on earth about what Sam Smith portrayed.
Did he just shart through his thong? That's what people say when they go to his live shows.
Yeah. They're like, it's early spring. They're like, it's 45 out, and he's just sweating.
Yeah. Why does it smell like funnel cake?
Yeah, this isn't exciting at all. We're just watching a man die early.
Gunn, you've got King 810. They just had an EP come out. Follow My Tears. Check it out. Check out the new King 810 store as well. Gunn, do you have anything else to promote here right now?
No, I'm just waiting for Landau to promote his stuff so I can return the favor and do a purchase here live.
Other than my new show on Blaze TV, I don't have much other than some upcoming dates at DaveLandau.com, and that's about it. So that's it. Yeah.
All right.
Which was more exciting, but that's about it right now.
Yeah, and the show is absolutely hilarious, man. Your sketches are great. You want to check them out. There's one with, I think so far the pansexual one is one of my favorites, where you guys are just licking pans at a protest.
It's sexually attracted to pans and tired of bisexuals taking our name.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. It was like, kind of reminds me of like the Chappelle Show, man. I like to see people taking risks again in comedy because now the new thing is clapter. It's not even people laughing. It's just people, that point was important. So.
Yeah. I honestly like to make very little important points in comedy. I just want to point out how ridiculous everything is. That's why I like the idea of every sketch is it's really just supposed to be 6 months into the future.
I like that.
I was watching a really good comedy special recently. It was super funny. I think it was, it's on Netflix from this chick. I think her name was Liza or Isa.
Oh, yeah.
She's a blonde.
Eliza Schlesinger?
I think so. It was a pretty funny special, but the thing that bothered me was she stopped, kind of mid show and was like, "Hey, just to make everything clear, I'm completely pro choice, abortion, da 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 da," and they kind of state their, that they're on the good guy team. That got the loudest cheer and applause, more than any joke she said for an hour and a half.
That's what bothers me is I feel like you have to check these boxes in order for Hollywood to accept you now. And there's really no reason to do it because you don't need that anymore. You don't need the acceptance and the gatekeepers and anything from that. But that is true. I mean, the audience has to, like, the idea that you have to agree with a comedian or even a band or anything else makes no sense to me. Like, I never listened to, like, Eazy-E as a kid or, like, whatever metal band, and I was like, I agree with everything he just said about murder.
Yeah, I also grab bitches by their nappy-ass weave.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
be
it's
afraid.
the same thing,
it's
man.
only a dick.
Yeah.
It was, the idea was you were to be entertained by it, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to agree with what every artist has to say. It makes no sense to me at all. I don't know when that shifted, but I've never watched somebody because I've had to be like-minded to them.
Yeah, that's why I like this show too, because it's like as we talk, we may not always agree with everything we say, but I don't feel like an urge to be like, hold on, stop. We need to argue this out, So it's okay to disagree with people. All right, well, thank you everyone for listening to Tool Shed Art Club. Of course, we have David Gunn and Dave Landau on, Austin and myself. We'll see you later.